If you listen to the show, you already know that we cannot exist without our sponsors. They are the ones who make things happen behind the scenes. So let's acknowledge Fuji Sports. We've been working with these guys for a while now, not only as far as this podcast is concerned, but also at the RŌL Academy. We've had their gear. I personally use their gis. What a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I mean, Jiu-Jitsu, Judo, MMA, tape, bags, anything you need for your Jiu-Jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk RŌL TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at RŌL Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armin Fati, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there are so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, you know, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code ROL Radio at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. Today's guest takes a deep dive into conceptual learning in BJJ, his standards for promoting students, how studying psychology has influenced his jiu-jitsu, and the impact one's upbringing has on their resilience. Here's the RŌL Radio with the creator of BJJConcepts.net and head instructor at Island Top Team in Nanaimo, British Columbia, Rob Biernacki.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
Rob Biernacki. I mean, Rob, first, thank you for being here. That's number one. But I feel lucky to actually have you here, have this conversation. Do you consider yourself one of the pioneers of jiu-jitsu? Many look at you that way.
No, by no means.
You're very humble.
I would say, I mean, maybe conceptual jiu-jitsu, or maybe the adoption of more, so where I feel that I exist in the jiu-jitsu space is I'm kind of at the intersection of the adoption of conceptual jiu-jitsu and gameplay to develop jiu-jitsu. So like I definitely was a pioneer of that. I'm to my knowledge, I was the first guy to be like really advocating that we learn through games, because I've been doing that for like over a decade.
We'll dig
at least
into
the first guy who was like, you know, out in the internet space advocating for that. But I'm like, it certainly doesn't make me a pioneer of jiu-jitsu. But yeah.
Well, we just recently had Stephen Casting on the show, and I feel like between two of you, like you two were the first faces that, at least one of the first faces that I've experienced on the mat. And I'm like, you know, I've been on the mat for 20 plus years. And like, I feel like you guys were way before me, or at least that visibility was created way back then. That's what the question is sourcing. I feel like a lot of people look up to you guys.
Oh, I mean, I can't argue that. That's a little bit weird to wrap my brain around, that people look up to me. But I have a very ambivalent relationship with people looking up to other people, with hero worship, with, I think all of those things have a very very dark side, and I think that we in the jiu-jitsu community see that dark side quite a bit. So I would hope that would mean that people are a little more inoculated against hero worship in our community, but they're not. If anything, things are getting worse, both in the world and in the jiu-jitsu community, when it comes to people looking up to someone for the wrong reasons, and someone having some skill in jiu-jitsu, man, I mean, there are a lot of people that are really good at things. I'm not saying we shouldn't look up to them for the things that they're good at, but looking up to people overall, and having that, allow us to like avoid some of the more coherent judgments we should have about human beings, right? It really, looking up to someone as a hero really bypasses your normal level of judgment. And we've got a lot of really, really shitty people in jiu-jitsu that still have a place in the jiu-jitsu community, despite being obviously terrible human beings. And I think that looking up to people is part of the problem. So I'm not very comfortable with how much people look up to me. I try to undermine that as much as possible. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing.
So where do you think this is coming from? I mean, let's be honest here for a moment. You've been on the mat for a very, very long time. Your exposure, especially online, has been anchored a while back. Many do consider you as a, fine, not pioneer, maybe not the guy who started, but you do have a heavy presence that has changed people's lives and their jiu-jitsu, right? Their perspective.
And that's the good part. So that's why, like I say, I have an ambivalent relationship with it, because the phrase, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to be so dismissive of the fact that I do have an impact on people, because that impact has been overwhelmingly positive, right? Like I get emails from people who have basically said, like, I was about to quit jiu-jitsu until I found your material, because the way that jiu-jitsu gets presented, the way that it gets taught, is it leaves a lot to be desired in a lot of places. And so the fact that listening to me or watching my instructional material has helped people find an understanding of jiu-jitsu, or found a connection with jiu-jitsu that would have otherwise been lacking, and that would have meant that they quit. Like, literally, I've had people, 10 years they've been training, 5, 7, 8 years they've been training, and they just felt like the whole time they were training, they didn't get it. And then they see the concepts that I'm presenting, or they see how I train, and that I'm still able to be successful. And especially as like a nerdy guy who isn't particularly athletic and all that. So like, I get that there's tremendous value in people seeing somebody and being able to model their experience on that. And it's like, it warms my heart. And like honestly, I get like part of there's a lot of things that are great about teaching seminars. One of them is the distinction between, my school at home, where everybody just, and it's not a bad thing, but they take for granted who I am, and that I'm, I'm just their local coach, right? Like, to them, I'm not, oh my God, it's Rob Biernacki. It's just, it's Rob. He's my coach. It's the only guy that's ever taught me jiu-jitsu, right? So they don't really know what they have. Whereas if I go to a seminar, there are people who will get on a plane and travel hours just to come to a seminar, just to tell me, hey man, you really changed my jiu-jitsu experience. You literally changed my life. And man, that shit brings me to tears. It's so impactful. So like, there's the good side, and I just want to try to make sure that I'm not one of the people that's contributing to the bad side of hero worship. So like, I try to make sure people understand that, like, I'm just a guy who's doing a job that happens to be a job that I'm very passionate about, and happens to be something that has a great impact on their life. But like, I didn't do them a favor. Like, if you're paying me for instructional material, then, I mean, I'm grateful that they thank me, but you don't need to thank me. Like, you gave me money. I gave you this material that I've created. And if that's been helpful to you, that means extra to me. So in that sense, it's more like I'm grateful to them, right? When somebody comes in and tells me something like that, you're making my life better. Like, I'm just a dude who rolls around in like spandex or pajamas, right? Like, I'm not anything special. And so the fact that people are positively impacted by me and share that with me, like, I think that I'm the one that rightfully should be grateful to them for telling me that, for traveling to come and see me. That's I think the relationship that we should have with with people who are supporting us and supporting what's really like a dream life for a lot of people.
Would you prefer not to be in a spotlight at all?
I guess it depends on where the spotlight is shining. You know, like if the spotlight is just on my career and my, like what I do with jiu-jitsu and trying to teach, then I don't really have a problem with it. If I get recognized at a tournament, which I do, like all over the place, that's totally fine. Like I love it when people come up to me and tell me that they like my work and like they want a photo or they, to chat for if I've got the time. I wouldn't want to have the spotlight on me where like if I go to a restaurant, people come up to me and to like actual famous people, which I'm almost at that point in my town. Like if I can't go grocery shopping without somebody coming up and be like, hey, you're Rob from Island Top Team. Oh, congrats. Like not people who are interested in training, just like people who see the local like news website or like follow me on Instagram or whatever. And they're being genuine and like they're coming up and they just want to congratulate me on my team's success and on what I've winning worlds or whatever. And that's still pretty cool. But like, I'm sure there'd be a point where that spotlight would be too much and I wouldn't want it.
Does that make you uncomfortable? The fact that unintentionally people are genuine about it, yet it puts you in this point, you're not even interested in jiu-jitsu. What I do is more of the fact that I am, I don't know if celebrity is the word here, but a public person perhaps.
Well, yeah, so to be honest, it hasn't made me uncomfortable yet. What does make me uncomfortable is when people come up to me and tell me that they're going to come and train at my gym and talk to me for like 2 or 3 minutes. And then they never come. Like, I actually I wish as a public person, I can't say anything impolite, but I would, like the jerk off motion. Yeah. When they start talking to me, I wish I could be like, yeah, sure. You're going to come and train. But like, they never do.
I feel like that happens to every instructor.
Oh, of course. Yeah. That's why I'm so cynical about it. It is like, dude, don't come and talk to me. Like I'm at Home Depot. I'm busy, man. Like, don't try and talk to me for 5 minutes and tell me how you're going to come to my gym. You're not going to come to show up at my gym. Come talk to me for 5 minutes at my gym. Don't do it when I'm out running errands. You're full of shit. Leave me alone.
Why do you think that happens? Why do you think people approach, just in general, instructors, the moment they find out, this happens to me, I know this happens to many, like the moment people understand that, like, oh, you teach jiu-jitsu, oh yeah, I always thought about teaching jiu-jitsu, I've done taekwondo when I was little, I done this, I done that, I always wanted to do it, I wanted to get it. Why do you feel people feel so obligated to share that, and yet they never follow through on it? I don't think they feel
obligated. So here's my take on it. To the level that I've been able to understand this, it's a sociological phenomenon. Have you ever heard of the term slacktivism?
No, I'm going to look this
up. So slacktivism is like, you care, in quotations, about an issue. So you go on a Facebook page and you like it and you make a comment, but you don't actually do anything to like help the issue. So like when people sign up at a fitness center and then they never go to the gym, like that kind of. So there's a mechanism in our brain that gives us the same dopamine hit for pretending to do something about something that you do for actually doing it. So people who really care about an issue, they don't go online and post a comment on a Facebook page. They volunteer, they donate money, they, whatever. Like that's actual real world impact. But there are a lot of people out there who want to feel like they're doing something, and that has just as much value to them as actually doing something. And that's basically why they're doing it. They're like, they will go home and they'll tell themselves, oh yeah, man, like I'm gonna go work out. I met that guy from the jiu-jitsu gym and I told him I was gonna go to his gym, so like I'm gonna go do that. And they get that same feeling of achievement and of satisfaction, but then it doesn't go any further than that. So yeah, like they're doing it for entirely selfish reasons, which is why I don't like it. The people who come up to me and tell me that like, hey, congratulations on your team's success and like, we're proud of you. They're not doing that for necessarily selfish reasons. They're doing that to have it like a genuine like human connection and support somebody in their community. And so that it never bothers me when those people talk to me, because that is genuine. When the other people talk to me, It's not genuine. It's for them, and it's wasting my time. So I don't like those people.
How do you deal with that? I mean,
I'm polite and I smile and I tell them, yeah, hey man, we're just down the street. Come in anytime. We'll be happy to have you. It's the only.
Have you ever been surprised by somebody actually showing up? You were like,
it's happened twice in 12 years.
Tell me the story.
So the one guy, and it's only happened once where the guy actually like continued to train. But 2 people have ever actually shown up at my gym. I was at my I have a detailer who looks after my cars for me. Does like paint protection film and window tint and stuff like that. So I was there and I was wearing a jiu-jitsu shirt, and the guy just came up to me and said, "Oh, you do jiu-jitsu?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, yeah." And then the detailer was like, "No, he teaches jiu-jitsu." And so the guy took my number, and sure enough, he texted me. He's like, "I'd like to come in." Made an appointment, came in, and has been training ever since. Shout out TJ. Good for you, man.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, that has to feel good. Once in a while, somebody actually broke the pattern or went against the grain of the expectation.
It's so rare as to not make it worth it. Like I was about to say, like I try to be as genuine a person as possible, and I think those interactions that is when I feel least genuine. Right? Yeah. Like I that's as fake as I get is when somebody bothers me when I'm out in public about coming to my gym. Like, oh yeah, sure, and I'm polite, and I'm like, I mean, whatever. I'm a professional. It's my job, but like I don't like that feeling. I would very much like to tell them, like, dude, don't waste my time. Show up or don't fucking talk to me.
Well, what we're learning right now is not to bother you at Home Depot. That's what we learned from this conversation. Listen, I mean, you've been on the mat for a long time. Clearly, there is a point of success behind everything you've done, everything that you're doing. A lot of passion, at least that's visible in literally 10 minutes of this conversation. How does this all start? I mean, what's the anchor point at the very beginning of this? Like, why jiu-jitsu? Why not checkers? Why not something else? What brought you in on the mat?
So this is it's funny. I just having just returned from a seminar tour. I've done I think this is the 4th podcast that I'm recording in like the last week. And I have mentioned this before. So this is, I acknowledge this is really pretentious, but I arrived here as the result of studying a lot of philosophy and sociology as a teenager. In particular, there's a American psychologist named Abraham Maslow that some people will be familiar with for the hierarchy of needs, with self-actualization being at the top of that hierarchy. He's less known for a concept called the circles or spheres of influence. And the spheres of influence that we experience on the outside are things like social pressure, and then things like shame or guilt as the circles get smaller and smaller. And then on the very inside of the circle is the threat of violence, and then violence itself as far as what can influence your behavior. And so as a young person with a very strong anti-authoritarian streak or bent, I just didn't want that. It was very easy to arm myself mentally against the spheres of influence on the outside. Once you learn enough about psychology, enough about sociology, enough about propaganda, enough about critical thinking, you can be pretty inured to outside influence that like you see on a day-to-day basis in life. But the actual threat of violence and violence itself, those are things that, if somebody comes up to you and they're bigger than you and they say, I'm going to beat you up if you don't do A, that is a much more difficult thing to prepare yourself for. And so that was very, very influential on me. And I wanted to make sure that to the extent that I was capable of it, I wanted to be free from physical coercion. So that was really what got me into martial arts.
What year is this?
Oh, goodness. I would have been in my teen, like 14, 15 when I read this, I think. So 1991.
So this is way before jiu-jitsu is jiu-jitsu, essentially. This
yeah,
is,
so
you're
like
talking
I'm a
about
black
before
belt in
UFC 1.
Taekwondo. I've done like every martial art that most people have heard of. I've done
Mhm.
karate, you know, ninjutsu, Wing Chun, all that stuff. And then in the early 90s when the UFC came out, that's when I became aware of jiu-jitsu and wanted to learn it. I got some jiu-jitsu training in the late 90s, but I really like more formally started training jiu-jitsu in 2001.
Do you think that the studies that you've done and the things that you've read early on in your life, plus the other martial arts, more of a traditional side, really shaped this more in-depth view on what you are expressing today? Meaning, you know, jiu-jitsu is more than just steps. We need to understand this. This needs to be a little bit more conceptual. There was a thought behind all of this versus us just, you know, spitting garbage out and doing whatever we are being told.
Oh, definitely. I mean, first off, the way that my brain works is I kind of like view things as, I categorize things as systems and then how to break systems. So whenever and my brain just does this. I'm sure it's an autism thing, but like whenever I look at any this is going to be really, again, like obnoxiously pretentious, but are you familiar with the term complex adaptive system?
Mm-hmm.
Or IntelliKey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, oh, there you go. Okay, so thank you. But yeah, so like any complex adaptive system, right? It's got a system behind it, and it's got ways of breaking that
Mhm.
system. So if you look at a set of laws or a government or a company or a sport, these are all complex adaptive systems, and they can be broken. So that's just how my brain categorizes things. So I look at a system and I look at how can this system be broken, and that's basically how I looked at jiu-jitsu. So like it's still possible, you know, nowadays if you look at kind of the trend of like just stand up, right? Like that is a way that jiu-jitsu can be broken. 7-8 years ago, leg locks was a
Yeah.
way that jiu-jitsu could be broken. And yeah, if you think about it that way, it's obviously it's, I think, a lot more beneficial to have an in-depth understanding of anything that you're trying to get good at, rather than just trying to get good at it the hardest way possible, which is what we had in jiu-jitsu for the first, you know, several decades. Like people were trying to get good at jiu-jitsu the absolute hardest way possible.
Was this the train of thought from the very beginning when you were a teenager and then going into your 20s as a young man?
No, unfortunately. I think I started to really view this stuff conceptually. I mean, I wish I had access to the full kind of understanding that I have now when I started, because I'd be so much better. Like I always say that just about anybody that trains with me for 2 or 3 years is better at jiu-jitsu than I was after 8 years. So yeah, it really wasn't until the late 2000s that both from studying Ryan Hall's material and Damian Maya's material, and just becoming more familiar myself with cognitive learning strategies and just like physics and body mechanics and all that, these ideas really started to cohere for me. And I was able to kind of create a learning system that I used for myself and for my students, that yielded the results that it did. So yeah, it definitely, there was half a decade, not wasted, because I don't think any learning is wasted, but it definitely wasn't done anywhere nearly as efficiently or effectively as it could have been.
Well, many would consider that, or many would say that if you haven't gone through the first decade or two of experimentation, you would not approach the point where the conceptual approach surfaced and become visible to you, right? I mean,
I mean, it would have been wonderful if somebody just gave it to me, like the way that I give it to my students. Well, you know what I mean, right? Like I've got like my black belts generally have like a huge leg up because they just start out with this.
But isn't that the case today with every single student because of the amount of information that we have, how Jiu-Jitsu has evolved, how it's being presented, the amount of black belts, the accessibility of the material? I feel like every student starting today has an upper hand versus what we experienced a couple decades ago.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't disagree, but I think there are still a lot of students at a lot of clubs that are doing the, jumping jacks, shrimping, warm up, 2 or 3 random techniques, and then rolling. That still very much exists. And if they don't take it upon themselves to go and do some homework and get some instructionals, or get together with their friends and do some gameplay based training, I think we're still in the phase where most people are going to take a decade to get a black belt, when I think that should be quite doable in 5 years.
You said that change came in around year 2000, somewhere there, when you start thinking conceptually, and you mentioned Damien Maya, Ryan Hall as some of the inspirational points for you. Was there a specific event or specific point in which that pivot took place, or was this a little bit more gradual curve?
It was more gradual. This again, it was a lot of things coming together. It was books that I was reading. It was, again, seeing Ryan Hall is the first guy to speak about jiu-jitsu in the way that was that was my language. When I heard him talking, I was like, oh, that's how I talk and think. So that having successful models is extremely important, right? We don't realize what's possible until we see it out in the world a lot of the time. So if you go back to when the 4-minute mile was broken, it was considered impossible. And then when Roger Bannister did it, within the next year, 4 or 5 other people did
of them broke it.
Yeah. So there's stuff that's it's in the ether, and then it takes an individual to bring it out into the world. And so I think that was very, very powerful for me, is to see oh, there's a nerdy guy. He doesn't appear to be obviously he's extremely physically gifted in terms of flexibility. That's something I don't have. But I think that's a gift in and of itself, because there are one of the things that I think I bring to the table as far as a skill as an instructor, or not even maybe as an instructor, but as almost like an interpreter of jiu-jitsu. I think one of the things that people come to me for is they're we know that this move works at a very high level, but do you think that that's a move that the average person can do without the physicality of an elite athlete at ADCC? And so I think that's because I'm not flexible, and I'm not strong, and I'm not fast. That forced me to analyze some of the techniques that are being executed and break them down into, okay, how much of that is just a physical attribute? How much of that is biomechanical or just mechanical advantage? And how much of that can actually be applied to the average person who can't stick their legs behind their head, who can't bench press somebody off of them? And I think that is a skill that I have, that because I'm not that physically gifted, if I had those physical gifts, if I was fast, strong, flexible, etc., I wouldn't have had to figure any of that out. And so I would have less value as a teacher or as an analyst of the game because of that. So even that, I'm kind of glad that it is the way it is, because I don't think I'd be as insightful about jiu-jitsu with it. So I'm glad I'm not Ryan Hall in that way, because I'm not as good at jiu-jitsu as he is because of it, but I think I'm better myself as an interpreter of jiu-jitsu because of it.
Do you feel that life would be easier if you were those things? Fast, strong, flexible?
Competition would definitely be easier. I feel like I have to be, and again, I think this is a good thing. I feel like I have to be significantly more technical than my opponents in most cases to have a chance to win, because I have a massive experience deficit. I didn't start competing until I was a black belt, and there were chunks of time where I didn't compete when I was a black belt. So that definitely it puts me at an extreme disadvantage. If you look at the amount of matches most of my opponents have had when I compete versus the amount of matches that I've had, it's a huge, like when I talk to some of these guys, I'm like, you've had how many? Oh, Jesus. So because that experience deficit means that I'm not able to express my full game in competition yet, like not even close. Like I've competed with people and then rolled with them in the gym. And like the difference between our, like what happens in the gym and what has happened in competition is so massive. So like I'm still very much learning how to compete and how to actually bring out my my full, you know, gym game in competition. And I'm aware that like no one is as good in competition as they are in the gym, but I think like the best, most experienced competitors, they're getting close to it. You know, like some of the elite guys, they're maybe executing 80 or 90% of their game, whereas I'm executing, you know, when I first competed, maybe 20% of my game. Now I think I'm maybe executing 50 or 60% of my game, but I'm nowhere near executing my entire game or anything close to it. So I think if I had those attributes, it would be much easier to bring out my game in competition. But again, I don't think that my life would be easier. I think if I was a more successful competitor, I'd be a worse coach. And so I don't think that I would have the career that I have. I would just be another guy who was pretty good at jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying I'd be exactly the same. Obviously, I think conceptually, and I would present it the way that I do, but I just doubt I'd have the same reach that I've achieved as a coach if I was more physically gifted.
I heard you talk about limitation of mind quite a bit. You mentioned some of it this time during this conversation, but I also see you speak about it quite a bit during other points where I was doing research before this conversation. I think what's interesting here is the fact that it appears to me, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it appears to me as you recognize there are things that you don't do well or you don't have the advantages points, right?
Yep.
Which requires you to do more work in order for you to keep up with quote unquote general population or whatever the goal is that you are chasing.
Well, I would say, not general population. I would say
Okay.
the top of our sport.
Okay. So
Yeah, like
that's fair.
when people, sorry, I'm just going to adjust myself here. I'm slipping down my couch. When people hear me say that I'm not a good athlete, they kind of laugh. They're like, "Oh, you know, whatever. Like I've seen you. You're skinny. You win jiu-jitsu tournaments." Well, I'm like, I mean, crackheads are skinny, so like that doesn't make me a good athlete just because I have low body fat. Like, no, but like, you know, I take my shirt off and people are like, "How could you possibly say you're not a good athlete?" And I'm like, dude, do you know what athlete means? Like, there are plenty of people who have low body fat that are not athletic. So compared to the general population of people doing jiu-jitsu, I'm fairly athletic. Compared to actual athletes whose job it is to compete in jiu-jitsu, I'm a shitty athlete. So like, it's really important that we create like scale for what we're talking about. So
But I
like
think
my
this brings
limitations.
Yeah, but I think this brings an interesting point of all of this, right? Because you looking at this as I'm chasing something. This is my goal, and I'm comparing myself to where I need to be. So I have to compensate my deficits
Yes,
to
exactly.
to match this up, right? Versus where a lot of people will say, "Well, I'm not good at this. I suck at this. So I'm gonna just quit. Why the fuck am I wasting my time?" And this is the
Yes.
interesting part about all of this is that the entire time as this conversation is unfolding is you are chasing something that you technically was not even designed for you in a sense. Like you are in a deficit and you are chasing something that's not accessible and you have to find ways to compensate for the things that you don't have. I would say most people don't think that way. Where's this coming from?
Well,
Like, why don't you just do things easy? Like, Rob, like why are you overcomplicating this thing?
man, no, that's I mean, that's a compliment disguised as a question, which I really appreciate. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, I mean, for one, I've felt my entire life that I'm like an outsider and I don't do things the way that most people do them. So that I think that's just something about how my brain works. I'm sure it's something about my circumstance. I'm sure it's also something about what the like the non-jiu-jitsu models that I've seen in my life. So like my parents, particularly my mom, who were like, I was largely raised by a single mom who, was in I mean, foreign, like we were born in Poland. I was born in Poland. My parents are from there.
So was I.
Yeah, I noticed. My father, he was a very intelligent guy. He spoke, I think, 4 languages. He was a civil engineer. He brought the country out of the communist regime. He fled the country, brought us to the West. But he passed away when I was younger. So my mom found herself in Canada, needing to raise 2 children while not like she was also an intelligent woman, but she didn't have formal education that was recognized in North America. So she had to work while going back to school, educating herself, raising 2 children. So when you see somebody do that kind of like make that kind of commitment and make that kind of sacrifice and elevate herself and elevate her children as a result of that, for me to be like, oh, I'm not that flexible, I guess I can't be good at jiu-jitsu, it seems like the biggest chicken shit thing ever. So like, I'm not going to pat myself on the shoulder for just trying to find a way to be good at something that I really love. When, my mom found a way to do and she was a teacher. So it's like she got a degree in education and became a school teacher, which is like, I'm sure a job that she enjoyed on some levels, but is also like, it's a normal job that has a lot of stress, that has a lot of negatives, where you have to deal with a lot of bullshit. So, if you can see somebody, and I think a lot of people who have come from that kind of background and seen, a parent or siblings or whatever really bring themselves up in our society, I think it's pretty tough for any of us to be like, I may as well quit. Like there's so many things that people do that are like, my mom did it through just a ton of hard work. I did it through just trying to be like intelligent and creative about how I sought out the process of being good at jiu-jitsu. So like I modeled other sports. I read a lot of books on, again, like how to learn, sports science, physics, body mechanics, yada, yada. But like, that wasn't hard work. I wasn't waking up at 7 a.m. to go work a not so well paying job and then going to school in the evenings and doing all that kind of, like, I didn't have to do any of that. So like, I'm not going to give myself a lot of credit. I just was persistent about applying the gifts that I do have, which are more the mental gifts than the physical gifts. So yeah, like that's all. It just, to me, it was like, I never wanted a regular life or a regular job. So if I wanted to do something that I cared about, I had to find ways to be good at it without relying on physicality. So that's just like, to me, there was no other option, right? Like, I wasn't going to go and do the 9 to 5, work a regular job, have a regular life. That just didn't seem like something that I wanted to. Then I would have been like, fuck it, I'll quit. I'll become, I don't know, a drug dealer or something. Like, do something easy so that I don't have to work 40 hours a week, doing manual labor or whatever. So like, in a sense, I do feel like I almost took the easy way out, which is that like, I didn't do the normal thing that's socially expected of me. I tried to find a way to break the system.
Do you feel that resiliency that you talk about from your mom, moving to a different country, across the pond, going to a different continent and raising 2 kids and really grinding in a sense, and embedded some core values, which now you are talking about is quitting is not an option. That's not even on the table. Like, I have to figure things out. I might have a deficit. I'm not flexible. I'm not strong. I'm not this. I still have to figure this out. Do you think that was embedded deep inside from early on your age?
I think I'm stubborn. Like, no, like, because
now we got something in common.
Yeah. There's, I think, again, without getting too like, arcane about it, right? Like, there's genotype and phenotype, right? And so I think that I was born with a certain predisposition, and I think that my upbringing and the role models that I had elicited that, allowed that phenotype expression in me where like if things had been a little bit different growing up, maybe that stubbornness would have been expressed in entirely different ways, less beneficial ways. I think largely the stubbornness that I have, that's I think innate, has been pretty positive. I think any trait can be a double-edged sword. It can be positive, it can be negative, depending on how you apply it. And I definitely have applied it negatively when I was younger. I think I've matured a lot over the years, and I've tamed a reflexively contrarian streak. I'm still somewhat contrarian, but like being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian is very easy to exploit. Again, like I think we have the problems that we do in our society because some people are reflexively contrarian and unbelievably stupid, and so they fall for incredibly idiotic ideas, and that's why we have the world that we have at the moment. So like I know that sort of thing is not beneficial. Just being like, somebody tells you something, be like, no, fuck you, I'll do the opposite. You are incredibly easy to manipulate when you're like that. And because I was working so hard on like not being manipulated when I was younger, I managed to make it to the other side of being a teenager and being somebody in their 20s where that sort of thing is most expressed. And I'm lucky that I made it to the other side of that. And now that I have, I'm more, I'm a little bit more sanguine. I can set goals and achieve them appropriately with my stubbornness rather than just being stubborn about opposing or just doing stupid shit.
Well, that growth, that mental awareness of where we've been, where we're going, and what we need to do to get there is so important, especially as we go through this life and jiu-jitsu journey in particular, because that's not always so easy. I've heard you say a interesting phrase at some point or asking a question is, how do you get better if you are a meathead? And it really stuck in my mind. But I want to spend this slightly differently. I want to pick your brain on this because you talked about systemizing things. You talked about deeper comprehension of what jiu-jitsu is. You talked about, you even said, I wish somebody showed me this early on so I don't have to grind this for so many years and just be stupid about this. Yet, when we come to our first class, first week, first month, first 6 months, it doesn't matter. We all are meatheads. We all are just stupid. We just don't know any better because well, if we knew better, then we wouldn't be there, right? So like, by itself, the definition is we come to learn something new by admitting that we don't know it. And then, regardless what the system is, let's just, for the sake of the conversation, say that the system is flawless and the instructors are amazing and they give us what we need. We are still meatheads. We are still very limited as far as how we receive the information. So how should we set our students for success, for them to be more open-minded about this, so they are not meatheads?
Well, so I'm going to push back because I don't agree that people are inherently meatheads when they're new at something. I think the term meathead, at least the way that I'm using it, is somebody of, let's say, limited intelligence who tries to solve every problem through greater application of force.
Well, then, right? Hold on. So let's pause here. So we have somebody who is their first week, first month, whatever, right?
Yes.
And they engage into jiu-jitsu. How many times do you see them being more physical than technical?
Oh, always. But I'm not talking about the technical side versus the physical side. I'm talking about how people learn.
Okay, well, and this is what I want to unfold here, because this is often misunderstood, right?
Because I'll give you I'm not the best coach, but I think I'm a pretty good coach. I think I'm one of the better coaches out there. I'm not going to be fake humble about it. I think the results kind of speak for themselves. I think I'm a really good coach. I have people who come to my gym who listen to what I say, to the degree, like, nobody listens to everything I say. Mm-hmm. And there's always a spectrum, but I have people who they get what is happening. They're like, okay, this is a physical activity, but it's a physical activity with an immense technical or intellectual component. Mm-hmm. if I focus on the physical activity part of it and not on the intellectual technical component, it'll take me much longer to get good at it.
Yep.
Therefore, I will, follow the steps. And then I have people who come in, and no matter how many times I repeat to them, no matter how much they just keep fucking doing the same dumb shit over and over again. So those are the meatheads, right? Like I always say that like half my job is teaching jiu-jitsu, and the other half of my job is teaching people how to learn jiu-jitsu.
Yep, 100%.
And so there are the people for whom I offer this is how you learn stuff, and they take it and they run with it. And then there are people who take this is how you learn stuff, and they completely ignore me, and they keep just going as hard as they possibly can and not paying attention. And so those are the ones that I would call meatheads, where like, there are people who've been training with me for 2 years that, if somebody was like, that's a Rob Biernacki student, you're fucking kidding me, right? Because like it's literally out of my hands. There's no amount of coaching, encouragement, technical information you give some people, they will still just fling themselves at 100% intensity at a training partner, and that's just the way it is. Like there are, and this is why I'm so like, kind of like, like you can't help everybody. There are people out there, if you look at like a bell curve distribution, there are people out there who are just not mentally capable of taking on advice and information. They're just going to do what they're going to do. As long as they're not unsafe, they get to train jiu-jitsu as well. If they're unsafe, then I just kick them out of the gym. So I definitely think there's an element of like, you cannot help everybody. It doesn't matter how good the system is. It doesn't matter how much you explain. It doesn't matter how many. This is, by the way, is where I think the games help the most, because there are people who, if you just have them roll, they will always roll like meatheads. If you give them a constraint-based game, yes, they will do it with more intensity than they need to, and no, they won't like accelerate their skills as quickly as the others, but they will accelerate their skills quicker than they would by just rolling and going ape shit. So I think if you just take the intellect side out of it and just have people execute games-based, constraint-based learning, that's the best you can do. But they're still not going to listen to the concept stuff. They're still not going to listen to you telling them to like not do this or do that or whatever. They're still just going to be very ham-fisted about what they do. So yeah, like that's kind of the cheat code for me for helping people, even if they're just like terrible at listening to a coach. And
is that a choice, or is that ability? I'm speaking about not being able to listen. So I'm not talking about go get water, but are we talking about, hey, here's the concept, here's the thought, here's how you should process this information, and they're like, yeah, and they're doing something else, right? So
I think it's a bit of both. So there's a, are you familiar with the term emotional dysregulation?
No. I'll look this
up
right now.
So this is it's a phenomenon, and so I only recently became aware of this. One of my visiting students, shout out to Oliver, he brought this to my attention. There's a concept in psychology where when people are overly preoccupied, I shouldn't say overly, but just like preoccupied with whatever is going on in their life, they've got a like, I think in general in society, we have not come to grips with the aftermath of the pandemic, or the pandemic itself. I think there was such immense disruption into people's lives, and because of where society now is afterwards, there are a lot of people who went through a lot of emotional trauma. There are a lot of people who currently are living through just financial strain and social upheaval. Like people are just walking around fucked up in the head way more than they realize. And I know we like to congratulate ourselves that jiu-jitsu is therapy, and when you come to jiu-jitsu, you can't think about your problems and all that. I think that's horseshit. I think that when somebody shows up to jiu-jitsu class and they're really fucking stressed because they're having some trouble at home, whether it's financial or emotional or whatever, or maybe they know somebody who can't go out in public without a mask because they're immune compromised, and if that person goes out in public with a mask, in some areas of the world, they're going to have assholes yelling at them for it, and like there's so many stresses that exist, and then they're trying to learn this technical skill. There's a level of emotional dysregulation that makes taking on information more difficult. And so I've taken it upon myself recently to bring the concept of emotional dysregulation to people's attention, and just like at the start of class be like, hey guys, whatever you got going on, we're here to learn jiu-jitsu today. So like, I know you got some stresses in your life. Maybe you're getting a divorce. Maybe you're, and man, is that ever going around these days? I don't know if it's just a little pocket in my town, but man, I've seen more divorces in the last year or two than I have in the last 10 years, right? Which I think is also just like a delayed effect from the pandemic, where a bunch of people had to stay together because of money and whatever. Anyway, whatever you got going on, you're here to learn jiu-jitsu. I want you to focus on keeping yourself and your training partner safe. I want you to focus on the learning process. Let's support each other through that, blah, 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 blah. Try not to fuck this up. I think that's part of it. I think there are just some people who are experiencing emotional dysregulation. They're not able to bring all of their faculties to bear. And so stuff goes in one ear, out the other. I think there are people who do treat jiu-jitsu as stress release. And so they're coming to it to just try to get that shit out of them, and they're training in a manner that's way too intense. So I think that is definitely part of it. I also just think there are some people who are just, I don't know what phrase you want to use to be polite, cognitively impaired. That, I think like, we live in a society that confers benefits on people within it. I think we live in a society where there are individuals who are alive because of the social safety net and the general safety of living in a society that would have been dead if they had to survive, in more difficult circumstances, because they make extremely poor decisions. Their impulse control. I definitely have students that I think are very lucky to be alive because of how stupid their choices are on a regular basis. Like they could have been killed many, many times because of doing idiotic things, and they just got lucky, or they had access to medical care, or they had access to emergency service, like whatever. Like there are definitely people out there who would not have been alive in the 1800s based on how their brain works. So like, I think there's a lot of that stuff that goes into it as to why people can't learn better. Teasing out what that is, like what I can do about that. I'm trying to do it, but I don't think because of how much time and energy I put into learning jiu-jitsu and how to teach jiu-jitsu, I certainly could never hope to speak as intelligently or be as informed about, the real nitty-gritty of psychology and how that and sociology and how that impacts learning. So like, I'm doing my best, but I definitely don't want to say like it's this. These are just things that I know a little bit about that I'm trying to have like inform how I teach. But like I think there are definitely on one end of the spectrum people who just struggle to learn because their brain doesn't work very well, and then there are people who are going through stuff emotionally who are struggling to learn because they're choosing not to focus all of their attention on the learning process. So like, I'm hoping to reach those with some things, and then the folks that just are not going to listen to me no matter what, I'm hoping to reach those with just the gameplay stuff and try to help them out to the best of my ability.
Does that mean that jiu-jitsu is not for those people? Because ultimately, looking at this in maybe even a very selfish way, but if you're not going to progress in jiu-jitsu, if you're not going to learn, if you're unwilling or incapable, whatever the reason is, like your success goes down. So is jiu-jitsu not for them?
Man, I think the answer is it depends. If somebody is coming to my club and they have severe limitation on their progress. I'm not the guy that gives out belts for showing up. So, I very much believe there are people who will never be black belt level in jiu-jitsu. Like, there are definitely people who will come to me for training who I will never put a black belt on them, not even a brown belt, and in some cases not even a purple belt.
How do you have this conversation with them? Like, how does one explain that?
I haven't had to have it in person because I've spoken about these things in public so much.
Okay.
So I think there are people who just know where I stand. I think that just about anybody could get a blue belt, but there will be people who can't. Again, going by my standards, which are fairly strict and kind of universal. So I don't want to get too much into it, but because I'm just on record about this, that I think there's a good number of black belts that shouldn't be black belts. And if that's true for black belts, then if we follow that logic, then that should be true for all of the belts, right? So if your goal is to be a black belt, but like genuinely, like have the skills of a black belt, have the skills to roll with good black belts, then yeah, maybe jiu-jitsu isn't for you. But if you just want to come and roll and like have fun with your friends and get better, like even the people that I've seen that are, man, it's tough. They really struggle to improve, but they do improve. So like, yes, they're not improving as fast as other people, but like that's true for anybody, right? Like I don't improve as fast as some people. I improve much faster than other people, and I improve. Like I've improved a lot in the last couple of years, despite having done jiu-jitsu for over 2 decades. So like I improved more in the last 2 years than I did in the first 8 years that I was doing it. And I've improved more in the last 2 years than I did in the previous 5 years, because I've just dialed in the process of learning and developing. So like, I'm sure that if I, as a like reasonably intelligent guy with a very good method for learning, can still have breakthroughs in development at 48 years old, somebody who has learning limitations and just sticks with it and keeps going, they can have those breakthroughs, after 5 or 10 years as well. So I wouldn't say that it's not for everybody, other than if you are not capable of being safe. If you cannot control your behavior to the point where you're a danger to your training partners, I don't think jiu-jitsu is for you. I think that because in combat sports in general, I think that any other activity, whatever your learning limitations are, go at it. But because we lend our training partners our bodies essentially for the learning process, if you can't, for whatever reason, like I'm not saying it's malicious, there are people that I've kicked out of my club that I didn't think it was malicious. I just thought they were too stupid to be safe. And there are people that I've kicked out of my club who I did believe were malicious. It wasn't a question of intelligence. It was a question of, we've had the conversation. Maybe they're sociopaths. I don't know, but they're just not safe training partners. I don't really care what the reason is at that point. I can have empathy if somebody is just too stupid to get it, but it's my job to keep my students safe. So I think that is the only area where I would definitely say jiu-jitsu is not for you. If you can't understand that you need to keep your training partners safe and you are reckless with your movements after X amount of time, I just don't think. And that can be white belts, that can be purple belts, that can, like, it doesn't matter how good you are. I think if you can't keep your training partners safe, jiu-jitsu is not for you.
Would you say that you have high standards of your students?
Yes.
So how do you respond to a thought, a notion of jiu-jitsu is for everybody?
Well, because that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think you have to be excellent at jiu-jitsu to study it and train it. I have high standards for promotion. I have high standards for what I think is good. I have high standards for safety. Something can be for everyone in the sense that, like, as long as you are safe, you have a place at my club. You may not earn the belt that another person will earn.
But wait,
But-
I mean, we all want the reward. We all chase the belts, right? I mean, this is what the society is all about these days. Like participation. Don't even start me on participation trophies, because this podcast is going to go for 3 hours.
Yeah.
But like there is this notion today, like there is this thought in jiu-jitsu that, and you mentioned it a moment ago, you come to X classes, you get it. You provide this bare minimum and you get it. Oh, life is hard, you get it. I mean, it seems like your approach is very different to all of this.
Yeah, but like, so I very much, I don't know how into the weeds you want to get on this, but like, I do believe in the idea of meritocracy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that our society is a meritocracy, and I think that that is a pernicious lie, and I think a lot of people buy into it, because we very much do not have equality of opportunity. We just don't, and anyone who believes that is like either gullible, uninformed, dogmatic, ideology. I don't care, like whatever, but you're wrong. But I would like to have my school be a meritocracy, right? Once you're through the door, whatever, like I grant you that it's, you're not coming from the outside with the same level of opportunity, even if it's just financial, right? Like not everyone can afford to do jiu-jitsu. I try to make it so that anyone who wants to do jiu-jitsu with us can afford it. That's a different story. But there are people who just literally, it won't even occur to them to come and do something because they just believe that they won't be able to afford it. There are people who will come and just think that, like, I can't do this because of whatever physical is. So like, I grant you that we're not even starting with a level playing field when you step on my mats. But I'd like to think that I can offer an environment where anyone who's willing to put in the work, and that's the key, right? Like if we're going to talk about merit, if you're willing to put in the work, I'm going to work with you. And you will have every opportunity to excel or just succeed or just survive. Whatever, like, again, whatever your physical capabilities, whatever your genetic kind of capability is, I will work with you. So in that sense, I think it's for everybody. Like, I think that everyone should have a chance to get as good at jiu-jitsu as their work ethic and physical abilities allow for. But beyond that, I'm not going to lie to you and say like, hey, dude, well, it's not even me lying to you. Like people know, like when we do promotions, if I'm like, hey guys, who do you think's getting their belt? Like they can figure it out.
Absolutely.
Everyone knows.
Absolutely.
And everyone knows who's not getting their belt.
And if it's done correctly, it's no secret behind any of this. Like there should not be. And I feel the same way at my academy. Like
exactly. So
it might not be talked about, but you know who they are.
You know. So I just, and I also take great pains to explain to people that like, hey guys, like I know there are times where people think someone should be promoted and they're not. And I'm explaining to them like, guys, this person is 190 pounds and they're a great athlete. They're very strong. They're very fast. Some of the things they're doing to you, they're doing because of their physicality. They're not doing because of their technique. So like there's definitely there's a mistake that people can make when judging even within the club, like, oh, that person should be this belt. And that mistake that they make is if they're tapping me, they should be the next belt from me. And if they're not tapping me, they should be a belt below me. And it's kind of like that that George Carlin joke where like you notice that anyone that drives slower than you is an idiot, and anyone that drives faster than you is an asshole.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't quite work that way because there are people who I think are definitely technically ready for a next belt, and maybe they're not tapping certain people in the gym and all that. That we can figure that out. But there are definitely people who are just not ready for another belt because the skill isn't there. But like that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be coming to class, and it doesn't mean that they're not still improving. So yeah, like I think that we can believe in merit and try to facilitate merit, without lying to people about what their skill level is. And I think that when people gain genuine skill and are then recognized for it, I think they feel much better about that than when they're just handed a belt. And I think that one of the things that I'm trying to do for my students is if I put a belt on you, you can go into some other club, anywhere in the world, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that guy's a blue belt, or that guy's a purple belt, or that girl's a brown belt, whatever. Whereas, man, I've seen so many people come through my gym from other gyms because we have this visiting student program where they're like, oh man, like I want to burn my belt. Like I shouldn't be wearing this belt. And I think that is a huge disservice to people. Like that's one of the reasons people quit jiu-jitsu, right? Like they train at a club that has poor standards. They don't have very good instruction, yada, yada, all the problems. And then they move to a different town and they go to a different club and they're just getting their ass handed to them by, one or two belts below. And that's one of the things that makes people quit.
Do you feel that responsibility of rewarding a rank gives a lot of pressure and anxiety on instructors, all just in general terms, making those decisions?
I think it can, but I think it all depends on where you come from.
Yeah.
I also think some people just don't care. Like I think if it creates
You mean
anxiety,
students or instructors?
Instructors. I think that if it creates anxiety, it's because you care. And if you care, then you can find a way for it to not create the anxiety. But I don't think you can entirely avoid it because there will always be situations like if you care about your students, and like I think because there's two sides of it, right? Like, do you care about the integrity of the process? That's a separate question from do you care about your students?
Mm-hmm.
I think there are instructors who very much care about their students, but they don't care as nearly as much or almost at all about the integrity of the process. So to them, if they're handing somebody a belt, they view that as a sign of caring about their students. They view that as like, I care about so-and-so. They've been training for 5 years. They should be a purple belt. And they want to make them feel good, so they give them a purple belt. So like, I don't want to judge that and say that it's wrong. But now you're telling me you don't care about the process, or you care way more about being liked than you do about the process. So those are like, that's a question only the individual can answer. I care about both.
Do you think on that front, do you think there will ever be a time when all of this will be systemized across, either the country or even internationally, in a sense of there will be some kind of leveled out system?
I sure hope not. I think that top-down systems are...
But that would solve a lot of problems, wouldn't it?
But it would create a lot of other problems.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. I'm not disputing that.
So I don't think that it's a problem. The fact that like we have different standards, like, I mean, everybody knows that if you get a degree from Harvard, that's different than a degree from Tulsa Community College.
You're right. I never thought about it that way. That's a good point.
I think that, people, like, one of the things that I'm trying to provide my students is people will know that if you get a black belt from Rob Biernacki, that's going to mean something different than if you get a black belt from, whatever McDojo affiliation I could name, right? Like that will carry a weight, and that is a commitment that I'm making. I know that there are some people who have made that commitment in the past, and they no longer make that commitment, and they're cashing in, and they give black belts out to people for different reasons. Right now, that's not something that people need to worry about from me. So if somebody wants me to be their coach, they're signing up for, you're going to have to be a really legit, grappler for me to give you a black belt. People know that that's not the case with the club down the street in my town, and I'm sure that exists everywhere, right? So I think that's a problem that somewhat solves itself as more people become more educated about what jiu-jitsu is. I think it was more of a problem and still is a problem in areas where the consumer is still quite uninformed. And I know that was the case not so long ago in my town, where people would be like, well, Rob's a black belt, the other guy's a brown belt, that's almost a black belt, what's the difference really? Right?
Yeah.
And like, but people know that now. Like people who like now, you Google me and you Google the other club in town. You Google me, you get the phone book in terms of like results. You Google the other club, you get nothing. So that's a problem that still solves itself to some degree or another. And my perspective on this could be wrong, just based on the fact that I've done so much work to differentiate myself from any nearby competition that like you can't make that mistake with me. If you do for not even 5 minute, a 1 minute Google search, you'll know what the difference is. Other places may not benefit from that. So they may have, and I certainly had a more cynical opinion on this in the past, where I was like, man, we need more differentiation on what is, a legit black belt versus just a black belt versus, all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's as much of a problem now as it could be, as people get more and more insight about what the jiu-jitsu world. People know there's a difference between black belts who compete and black belts who don't. People know there's a difference between black belts who compete at the local level versus regional versus national versus international versus world. Like, people are kind of figuring that out. I think as we gain more traction as a sport, that stuff will become more obvious. And just having a governing body that states it will just introduce the same corruption that we have with other large governing bodies, where people will pay and they will get their black belt anyway. And like,
that's already happening. Yeah.
It's exactly. So like, I don't think having a more centralized authority solves that problem. I just don't think it does.
You think jiu-jitsu is mainstream at this point?
No. I mean, mainstream's
How
a
many
funny
students
word.
do you have? How many students do you have coming in, brand new students coming in, or prospects coming into your academy, and they have no idea what jiu-jitsu is?
Still quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the mind-blowing part, right?
I mean, I guess, again, it depends on what you mean by mainstream.
Yeah, it's a very vague statement. Right?
And it's become a loaded word too now. Like, mainstream now is like a criticism. I guess it always was if you were a hipster or
Right,
if you were a fan of a subculture, you didn't want it to be mainstream. But yeah, I don't think jiu-jitsu is mainstream. Like, I think karate is mainstream.
Yeah.
I don't think jiu-jitsu is mainstream yet.
Will it ever be?
I don't know.
Tough questions.
No, and like, because like I hesitate to give strong like, I think one of the worst phenomena about our society is that people now feel like they have to give definitive opinions on things they know very little about.
Mm-hmm. Well, people are very opinionated.
Very opinionated. Like the term confidently wrong,
right,
is such a thing now. Like, people are so confidently wrong about so many things that are so easy to not be wrong about. Like, we have more information at our fingertips and more people completely ignoring how to access good information than we ever have before. At least before the internet, people who were poorly informed knew they were poorly informed. They knew they were dumb, and they just listened to smart people. Yeah. And now people are convinced that they're well informed while being stunningly ignorant. So it's like the cost of the internet is definitely higher than the benefit of the internet at this point. I think up until a few years ago, the internet was mostly beneficial to us, and I think we just hit a tipping point recently where, like, no, now the internet is just used to misinform people and make them convinced that they're right to a degree that I think is now just detrimental to society.
Yeah, I think very interesting times ahead of us, as all of this is.
It's a Chinese curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Listen, Rob, we've been at this for well over an hour. I want to be respectful of your time. But what I do at the end of every episode, I have a question for you from a previous guest. Now, he had no clue that who will be answering that question. So think of it as question and completely in blind. And I had Stephen Whittier on the episode.
Yeah, SVG.
Absolutely. Yeah. So he asked, and this is very interesting. I'm actually curious how this is going to unfold from your perspective. He asked, what would it take for you to quit jiu-jitsu? Not whether you would. What would it take?
Fuck, that's a good question.
I figured it would be.
Yeah, no, that's a very okay. Sorry for like the pause. I'm really trying to I'm trying to think
take your
about this
time
in the
because this
background
is
while I
deep.
talk about
I
it.
had to process this.
So I mean, obviously a catastrophic injury that just made me incapable of doing anything that resembles jiu-jitsu. Like I think if I was, obviously like a quadriplegic, or if I lost two of my limbs on one side of my body,
Let's put that aside.
Man, if I feel like as long as I can physically do jiu-jitsu, I will want to do jiu-jitsu. I will give a very macabre answer because I think it's possible. Only in a very, very dark timeline. I don't think this is going to happen in our world. But from what I've seen so far, I think one of the eventualities with how fractured our society is becoming, how polarized our society is becoming, if a world were to exist where the only people remaining doing jiu-jitsu were the kind of people that I just couldn't be around, and I'll leave that up to people's imaginations as to who those people are. I don't think it's that hard to figure out. I think we are currently about to repeat what happened in 1930s Germany. And it can go very differently. I'm not saying it has to go the way it did there. And I'm certainly trying to be hopeful that it doesn't go the way it did there. But what's happening across several countries in terms of, electorally what's happened, we are literally replicating exactly what happened in 1930s Germany. Or we're running that experiment again. It's like, what happens when people of that populist demagogue kind of nature get into power? And what do they do with it? So like, if I was a jiu-jitsu instructor in 1930s Germany and my only choice was you have to teach the SS, I would quit jiu-jitsu. But then, my choice would have been flee and teach jiu-jitsu to the French resistance or something like that. So, I would still try to find a way to do it. But I would like, that is probably the only circumstance in which I could see quitting jiu-jitsu. Is just like, if there was no way, if society has gone that far where it is now being run by those kinds of people, and the only way I can do jiu-jitsu is to do jiu-jitsu with those kinds of people, I would quit.
I lost you for a second. You're back.
Yeah, I lost you as well.
So let me ask you this, pivoting this. Would there be anything outside of extreme circumstances that would allow you to make a decision to pause this amazing journey of yours and focus on something else?
No, outside of very extreme circumstances, this is such a part of me. It's such a part of me that I've taken pains to, not pains, but like I've taken, I've made an effort to try to have other things in my life so that I'm not as one-dimensional a human being as I could be. Because I saw the impact on people in the jiu-jitsu space when jiu-jitsu was taken away from them. A couple of years ago, in one capacity or another, and they responded very poorly. They became radicalized. They became, it just like it can do terrible things to you if your identity is built entirely around something. So I do have other things in my life. I'm very fortunate that financially, if I had to not teach jiu-jitsu tomorrow, I could do it. I'm very fortunate that in terms of like a hobby, if I had to just like retire and do a different thing, like I could do it. I don't think that's the case for most jiu-jitsu practitioners. So I've tried to create other avenues of self-expression and fulfillment, and I have other financial avenues that I could pursue, but I love this more than I love anything else as an activity. So if I love it and I want to continue to be able to express that love and feel that love, then under no circumstances could I see letting go of that.
Well, and I think that shows. I mean, just from this conversation, and I mean, everybody who's listening, doing a very quick research on your name, it becomes very visible how much passion, how much desire, how much love there is associated with everything that you do. So for that, I do want to say thank you. I often say we need more people like you to really impact this world in a positive way. And
very
it's
high
listen,
praise. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and you're a very humble person. I mean, it's very visible from this conversation. You know, even though that you don't disagree with heroes, I do think that a lot of people do look up to you, and I think you've done an amazing job to impact this jiu-jitsu community in a very positive way. For that, I do appreciate.
Well,
Rob,
I mean, that is my highest aspiration, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I can impact the jiu-jitsu community and individuals in a positive way, that is the best thing I can do with my life. So if I'm achieving that, then that means the world to me.
Well, listen, keep on doing. Keep on doing. Listen, before we wrap this up, if anybody has been living under the rock for whatever reason there is, and they do not know who you are, but they would love to connect with you, where can you be found? Website, social media? I mean, where are you present? Where is the point of contact with you?
Yeah. So, I mean, probably the most important one, if you don't live in, Nanaimo on Vancouver Island in Canada, would be bjjconcepts.net or .com. Both of those will take you there. That's my online academy. Features all of the concepts, the gameplay stuff. It's got a pedagogy section for instructors or aspiring instructors, which I think is still a unique product in the market. So if anybody's interested in that, check it out. We also have an Instagram for BJJ Concepts. My personal Instagram that I run for my school is Island Top Team. So if you want to get in touch with me there, and islandtopteam.com is obviously my school's website. If anybody is interested in our visiting student program, we didn't really get to talk about it, but anyone from anywhere in the world, you are welcome to come and stay for free for 1 week. You can stay at my house. I have a 3-bedroom house. I only need one of those bedrooms, so you can stay. You know, I have a lovely ocean view. The visiting students sit out on my deck and have their coffee in the morning, and they look at the ocean. A lot of people really enjoy the serenity of it, aside from the jiu-jitsu experience. So yeah, if you want to come and visit for a week, it's free. You can train for free. You can stay for free. You just have to get here. You do have to schedule it. We are booking well into next year at this point. So yeah, if anyone's interested in either visiting and training with me, or if you want to have me out for a seminar, yeah, I'm booked out till 2026 at this point. But
and I hear that you're not doing 6 weeks in a row of seminars anymore.
Ever again. I'm going to limit my tours to 2 or 3 weeks. Oh God. I mean,
we didn't even touch on that.
Yeah. But, I mean, the process of seminar tours is so draining, even for someone who loves it. And like, no matter how tired I am, I will come to your club and I will give you the best that I can give you. But the days in between and the travel and all that for a 48-year-old man, I can't do that shit for 6 weeks. So yeah, my future tours will be shorter and a little bit more spaced out. But I absolutely love meeting new people and teaching seminars and going to different places. So yeah, if you want to engage with me about jiu-jitsu, those are the options. If you disagreed with what I said, just don't send me death threats. I've gotten those before.
That's when you draw the line. Everything else is fine. Yeah, no death threats.
Yeah, anything else is fine. Just don't send me death threats, man. Like, I get it. You're one of the uninformed people I talked about. You know, just leave me alone.
Fair enough. Rob, it's been a blast. It's been a phenomenal conversation. I really do appreciate you being here. And again, I keep on doing what you're doing. We need more people like you. We need more leaders like you. We need more people with something inside their head and just communicating that out there. I feel like Jiu-Jitsu is so amazing, and yet, there's a lot of bad vibes out there, and I think you're doing positive things, and I appreciate it. So thanks for being here. Thanks for talking.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.